Hello, everybody, and welcome to the newest episode of the Theater Enthusiast podcast. I am very excited to welcome our next guest. She's currently starring as Angelica. I have to sing it. Like, you cannot not sing that. I'm sorry. She's starring as Angelica Schuyler in Hamilton. Please welcome Ms. Jennie Harney Fleming. Oh, wait, hold
Yeah,
on. There it is. It always happens.
that's awesome.
Yeah. It's great. And I always say this to every guest who comes on. You can hear it on the Zoom, but for some reason, the recording just like cuts it really quickly.
Yeah,
But who's ever listening, it's like, yeah. Oh, well, Jennie, thank you so much for coming on to the podcast. And thank,
Allison, thank you so much for having me.
of course, and I just also want to thank you because I know you have a busy schedule. It's the holiday season, like lots of things in life are happening for you. So thank you for taking the time out to chat about life in theater. So
Yes,
yeah, so let's start with what I always start with. Where are you from?
I am born and raised in Brooklyn, New York City.
Oh, what? I don't know why every time I'm like, oh,
Woo!
New York, Long Island, represent.
Hey, there you go.
Yeah, so have you always been interested in performing? Because I know you started at a very early age, like four, right?
Yeah, I started dancing at 4. My father used to be in the theater industry, and he still does directing at our church. But he left the industry before I was born, but still taught me and my siblings and some of the kids around the neighborhood about theater and stuff like that. And so I just kind of followed in his footsteps because I had such an early introduction to it and everything.
Yeah. So I'm assuming that you were performing all through school because you ended up going to the very famous Fame High School, LaGuardia.
Yeah. I performed when I was in elementary school. I did the talent shows, I sang, I was known as the Lion King girl because I sang, I want to be a mighty king. I was in the
Listen,
eighth. So,
it's still on Broadway. You can
yeah,
do it.
listen, I would have if they let me. But yeah, so I just did in elementary school. I mostly stuck to the talent shows, and then eventually I got into 113 in Brooklyn. It's a junior high school that caters to the arts. It's kind of like the precursor to LaGuardia in Brooklyn.
Mhm.
And then I went on to LaGuardia. I was a dance major, and then I switched over to music, and then I went to AMDA eventually. It took a few years to make up my mind, and then I went on to AMDA. So it's been kind of, sequential in that
Yeah.
way. And I always performed after school and over the summer in like different summer programs or, in the church choir and stuff like that. Yeah.
Yeah. So with that being said, you went to AMDA, there's a lot of performing, there's a lot of theater schools out there in the world, especially in New York. What made you
Mhm.
decide particularly on AMDA?
That decision was based on a couple of different things. I think the fact that it took me a little longer to make a decision about what I wanted to do, what I felt confident in pursuing as a career. Um, I didn't know if I was willing to do a 4-year conservatory. And since they had the 2-year option, and I had already accrued some credits from going to a CUNY in Brooklyn, I said, well, maybe I can get my degree, cumulatively over the years, but still get a jump start on my career since I've kind of made this turn later than I would have liked to. So that was one impetus for it. Another was that it's here. It's in the epicenter of everything that we want to do. I can do research and go see shows and be in school and figure out how one can feed the other. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it's just right. It was right there. It was right by my high school. It was right by Juilliard. It's right by Lincoln Center. So I thought location wise, it was a no brainer.
Yeah. What was your first Broadway show you ever saw? I'm just totally curious about that because you grew up, in the art scene. What was the first
Mm-hmm.
show on Broadway you saw?
The first show probably that I can remember seeing, because I know I saw some when I was young.
Mhm.
'Cause we moved to California for a short stint, and then I came back to New York. And when we came back, I think it was Les Mis.
That was my first Broadway show too. and I was
Stop.
5. Yeah. For years, like I would tell my mom, I was like, you don't take a 5-year-old to see Les Mis. And then like a couple of years ago, she was like, you need to get over it. The tickets were free.
Right,
Like,
right.
relax.
Priority, ma'am. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I believe that was the first Broadway show that I saw that I can recall. But I remember growing up and listening to the Bette Midler album of Gypsy,
Hmm.
and just knowing it and just belting it on Saturday mornings. I didn't know anything about what was being talked about. I was like
Yeah.
6. But I would just, I was so attached to the album. And then, of course, there's all kinds of other music that we hear all the time. We don't know what it's from. And then, one day we see the show and we're like, oh my God.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was watching Jennifer Hudson talk to
Mhm.
Howard Stern because I sometimes just watch like random YouTubes, and she was talking
Mhm.
to different actors about auditioning for like really big roles that were in their career. And she was talking about her audition for Dreamgirls. And she was saying that she didn't know anything about the musical. She just knew the music. So I think that is true for a lot of people when it comes to shows, because the music
Yeah.
is so great. I mean, you can't really
Yeah.
beat Gypsy and Dreamgirls music.
You
Yeah.
can't. Bette Midler, come on. But my father actually originated Curtis Taylor Jr. in the original Dreamgirls.
That's
So
amazing.
that was, yeah, so that was really, that goes to show you how much of a role his career did take in, or have on me, the impact
Yeah.
that it had on me, child.
So when it's revived on Broadway and you're in the
Mhm.
show, you can be like, My dad was the original." Like that's gonna be like, that's gonna be articles. Like,
Right, right.
his father was also in Dreamgirls. Yeah, I'm waiting for that, has to be revived. I'm surprised that hasn't come here yet.
Yeah, it did and it didn't. I
Yeah.
believe they did a production, I think in 2011, that was started in New York and then went on tour, but I'm pretty sure it was up at the Apollo in
Yeah.
Harlem.
Hmm. I remember
They
that.
did it. Yeah, yeah.
My old roommate works international business, and I think
Mhm.
she did work on that production. And
Oh,
they brought it to Japan, I think. Like they always bring
yeah.
like the same shows, like West Side Story, A Chorus Line, Dreamgirls. And that's my joke with her, is like it's always the same shows. And she's like, yeah, but they love it there. So I guess like, if it
Mhm.
works, there you go.
If it ain't broke, don't fix it.
Yeah, exactly. So you graduate from AMDA. What is the next step? What happens next?
After I graduated, they set you up very well here in the
Mhm.
city in terms of giving you an opportunity to be seen by agents and having panel nights and just starting to build those relationships and networking before you even leave the school. And then that last semester, you're given permission to go and audition. You're not, they kind of frown upon it prior to that. And then that last semester, they're like, yeah, go audition, man. And so I did. And so when I left ANDA, I left both with an agent and having booked my first production. And it was a Theater Works tour
Mhm.
where I don't know if they're doing it the same way they did then, but it was a bus and truck where you earned every stitch of your equity card. I mean, every stitch, because you are in the cold in one van with your 5-person cast slash crew, and everybody has multiple roles to fill.
Mhm.
You are building the set, setting up and breaking down your set every show. You're doing each other's laundry. You're driving from one state to the other state at 8 o'clock in the morning to perform in freezing cold gymnasiatoriums,
Yeah.
for a bunch of screaming third graders. You know what I mean? Like that's kind of like that time period where it's like, I'm doing it because I love it. I'm doing it because I love it. You have to remember
Yeah.
why you're doing it, because you're earning it. You know
Yeah.
what I mean? You're earning your stripes in a way. I don't know if it's still the same now,
Yeah.
but that's how, 10 years ago. But and then after that, I had, while I was on tour, I think I had already booked a second regional theater production. I think it was a production of Beehive or
Mhm.
Thunder Knocking at the Door. I can't remember, but I went to a couple of different regional houses and did a couple of productions, and then, um, that's the funny thing about our industry is that somewhere in our minds we start to believe that the trajectory is a straight inclination,
Mm-hmm.
you know, and it's not.
Yeah.
It will never be that. You know, somebody, you will turn around and somebody has booked Hamilton out of college. You'll
Mm-hmm.
turn around and somebody has not booked nothing, no agent, no, you know, nothing. And will have, you know, just be working their butt off for years. And then you'll turn your head and they'll have originated a Broadway role that's blowing up all over the place. You
Yeah.
know what I mean? There will be people that showed so much progress, promise, top of their class, the most talented people you've ever seen, and you leave college and you don't see them nowhere.
Mm-hmm.
Or people that'll go overseas and will make a name for themselves there, and that's, you know, that's what they've learned how to do. You know what I mean? It's just the paths are just so unpredictable, and you really got to do it because you love it. Don't do it because you want no money, because that is few and far between.
Yeah.
And you're going to be doing more survival jobs that you probably, you know, anticipated or had hoped.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and it won't seem fair. It'll, you know, but you got to let go of comparison. That's the biggest thing, honestly.
I think that's such a important lesson to learn as well, because I think, at least for me, when I was in college, blank years ago, because, you know, I'm a certain age now, um, that, you know, when you're in college, and I guess maybe it could be just like a bubble of, you know, learning, and you think your career is going to go a certain way. And, you know, and they do tell you certain things like, you know, for one audition, you like go on 100 auditions, you book one thing, or, you know, just how your life goes. It's just such an important lesson that, you know, you never really know how your career is going to go once you leave college and where you're going to end up. And, you know, getting back to the whole like trajectory of what things are, and going back to YouTube clips, I was watching one with Patrick Harris, and he was saying that he got cast in something when he was young, and somebody took him out, and he said, you know, your acting career is going to be like surfing, because, you know, you're, as much as you go out and try and get the wave, sometimes you're going to get the wave and sometimes you're not. Like, and you'll get the wave, you'll be riding the wave, it's going to be great, and then you have to go back out and paddle and try and catch the next wave. And I thought that was such a great metaphor for what performers or whomever's in the industry go to have a career, because, you know, you have people who made their Broadway debuts and doing all these things, and then like a couple of years later, you're like, oh, whatever happened to them? And they're still working, but you just kind of don't hear about them as much, or something else has happened, or their career is taking them into a different direction. So I just think that's an important lesson for people who are listening to take in and learn. So thank you for your insight for that.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Also, just want to say that Jenny is backstage right now at her job at Hamilton. So that's why Priscilla got her food, and there was an announcement for that. So how
Sorry.
did, no, it's fine. Please don't even worry. Like, I'm sure I live in Manhattan, so I'm sure you'll hear like a siren at some point,
Yeah.
you know, through, because people who have listened have heard the many things that happen around me. So how did Motown come about for you?
Motown, I booked Motown in 2013, 13, 14, 14 maybe.
Yeah.
One of those, 13 or 14, because I got back in 15. I was on the road for 17 months. So
Yeah.
and Motown, you know, that was a ground up audition. I now in hindsight, I know that a large part of why I got called in from Motown is from the relationships that I fostered from going into audition for Telsey.
Mhm.
Um, and for getting really close on certain things. Like there was a Ray Charles musical that I got to final callbacks for that didn't, you know, the production didn't, you know, go any further past the audition rounds. But, you know, because I know so many people were involved in that were also involved in Motown, I would be remiss to not make that connection now that I understand how it works.
Yeah.
And I went in and I went into for an onstage featured ensemble role, but I was offered a swing track, which was very difficult.
Mhm.
You know, I think if I went in under, first of all, at that time I really didn't understand what a swing was. Like I got like the premise of it, but I
Mhm.
didn't understand what the job was until I started to do it.
Yeah.
Um, and unfortunately, there's just such a gap in in the education about what it is to swing and to stand by,
Mhm.
um, and the skill set that is required to do that. Sorry, my phone is going crazy.
Oh, it's fine. You're very popular. It's all good. Don't worry.
Christmas shopping, people are like, I'm getting this. Okay, anyway.
Oh,
But
I understand that. It's the
yeah.
holidays. I get it. Yeah.
Um, so yeah, what was I talking about? I was talking about a Motown.
Yeah.
Swinging is a real get you gotcha, and you don't realize if you continue to do the work, um, it takes a second, but then you realize what your job actually is. You know what I mean? Because I
Yeah.
feel like when we go in, we think our job is to go and hit it and be marvelous and be spectacular. But our job is as swings and standbys is more than that, you know. Yes, absolutely. Go in, know the work, do the work with excellence, you know, work on it, you know, you hone your craft. But the juggle of maintaining the information for multiple different tracks and the relationships, and not just like I go out from wing two and step on number four stage left and raise my arm, you know, not just the basic blocking up the thing, but understanding the nuances and the energy shifts and the you know, being a strong enough of an actor or actress to, you know, engage with the regular on stage cast and fill in that space,
Yeah.
you know, without glitch. You know, I mean, they're gonna be glitches, okay?
Hmm.
That's just the bottom line. You gotta embrace that to come along with it. Just let go of that expectation of yourself. Um, but also building relationships with the cast members off stage, anticipating, being able to listen and know when somebody's going down, or you know, building relationships and rapport with the people backstage. You know what I mean? With your sound and your hair and your, you know, wardrobe department and all those wonderful people who support you, props. And I mean, those are things that you have to do anyway, but it just elevates so much more when you're a swing, how much more engaged and attentive you have to be in a different way that they don't, nobody tells you. You just have to figure it out once you get there.
I definitely want to go back to talking about what it's like being a swing because that was your life in Hamilton for a while. But before we do
Mhm.
that, I do want to talk about your Broadway debut in The Color Purple and what that was like
Mhm.
going into that show. Because I will admit, I didn't see the show until they announced, I call her Queen Heather Headley going into it. And I was
Yeah.
just like, I'd never seen it. And you know, you always get older when you're like, oh, this show that like was originally on Broadway for the first time when I was in college is now getting revived. And you're like, oh, but I had to say, like, that production was just so incredible and so moving. And Cynthia Erivo, and you also do a beautiful rendition. If you guys go on her Instagram, you have a beautiful rendition of Here I Am on there pinned to your channel, which
Yes.
I've listened to like 3 times already. I'm not sure. I really do love that song. Um, but what was that experience like going into that show with that cast? And I'm sure that Cynthia Erivo has won the Tony by then, and it's a very like well-established show. What was that like going in and making your Broadway debut?
That was a roller coaster, really. The last production contract that I had been on, full big production prior to that, was Motown. I
Mm.
left in 2015. I went to do an off-Broadway run of a show called Pearl, where I originated the role of Pearl Bailey and
And you were
met my husband.
nominated for an award for that, which I
Yeah,
can't think of at the
Adelco.
moment, but for Best Lead
Mhm.
Actress.
That's correct, with the Adelco Awards.
Hmm.
It's a very short run. It was in one of those Midtown International festivals, theater festivals. I can't remember which one. Um, but after that, I had a season of drought.
Hmm.
Yeah, I wasn't booking. I wasn't getting in the room. I was very frustrated with my representation at the time. And I didn't understand what was happening. And I went back to my survival jobs. I went back to temp work. I went back to, building my makeup kit and doing, makeup for weddings and stuff like that. I went back to wedding bands. I really had to, like you said, start to paddle. You know what I mean? Look for the next wave. And I had been in for Color Purple twice already, in which the casting director told me, "You're just not right for the show." And I was very confused by it, but I just left it alone. I had flown back when I had a call back for another show, you know. And so when they called me in for it, a friend of mine, a dear friend of mine, Jason Michael Webb, was the MD on it at the time, or he period. And he asked me to come in, and I came in, and I kind of held my breath the whole time because I'm like, look, these people done told me already. They don't think that I'm right for this show. I'm gonna come in because y'all asking me to come in, but I know you're not gonna book me for it. So that was kind of the attitude I had the entire time, was just being very polite and doing the work, coming in, being diligent, being open, being warm, but really having no expectation of booking it. So when I got to the final callbacks, and it was down to me and one other young lady who I adore, it was like, okay, well, Lord, whatever, however this goes, I'm okay. I have peace with whatever, if it's for her, it's for her. I wish her well. If it's for me, wonderful. I hope she wishes me well too, but it can go in either direction and I'll still be, feeling pretty full.
Yeah.
And I booked it, and I was so stunned because I had been in the season of drought, and I really didn't think this would be the thing that pulled me out of it.
Yeah.
And I remember getting the call and just sobbing. I was teaching at Brooklyn Academy of Music at the time, one of their summer programs that my dad had been conducting. I just sobbed. And I was ready to get back into the ring. You know what I mean? I kind of put up my gloves for a bit. And so I actually joined the company in the last 2 weeks that Heather Headley was there. Jokina, I believe at the time, was like 6 months pregnant or something crazy. Like however pregnant she was, it was like, what? And you couldn't tell. And she was still doing an incredible job. A friend of mine had just joined the cast, and I had a number of friends that were in the cast. And so it felt kind of like a coming home in a way, because there were so many people who I loved that were there already and that were fond of me. And that's what I love about our industry, is that we are really, when we love each other, we love each other down, know. And so it was such a blessing to be able to get in there, squeak in there with Heather Headley, because she was just so warm and so wonderful. And just watching her is just such a master class. She's just wonderful. And then and it was just a real affirming to me, especially coming from my last job that was as a swing, to be given an onstage role when you didn't ask to be a swing, or when you didn't sign up for the swingdom. It took a blow. I took a blow with that one, but I wound up learning a lot and loving it and growing so much from that experience. I would never trade it for anything at this point. But then the show closed maybe 4 or 5 months after I joined. That January, and that very same week, the show closed, I think, on the 9th of January. And I had my first audition for Hamilton on the 11th. Same casting office, Telsey. That's why I try to be, even if it's something I don't necessarily want to go in for, I'm like, if it's Telsey, I'm doing it. I'm gonna go ahead and put my name in the hat.
Did you not want to go in for Hamilton?
No, I did.
Oh, okay.
I did. I'm just saying it as a reference to when we're offered auditions, and sometimes for things that we don't really necessarily care for, the important what we tend to forget sometimes as actors or performers is that we're building a relationship with the casting agents. That they even if it's not, we know we're not right for it, we still go in for it because we respect them. We want them to see another side of us, X, Y, and Z. And if it goes forward, then it does. And if it doesn't, then, whatever. But I always try to respond to agencies that continue to call me in because I want them to see my colors and see my consistency and see my range.
Yeah.
Um,
So you had your Hamilton audition. Was that what type of audition was it for? Was it just like a general come in for Hamilton for whatever role, or was it a swing? What was it for?
it was specifically for a standby position.
Okay.
And I think there may have been five other girls in the audition, all of whom I knew. Some were very, very dear friends of mine. Um, and it was always I think it was for an immediate replacement in Chicago for a
Mhm.
standby position, but I was the only person that was asked to come in for the universal standby position. Um, I don't think anybody, to my understanding, when I spoke to these women, I
Mhm.
was the only person that had been given that specific request.
Yeah.
And I had my first audition, and I think it went really well. And then, there were a couple of other follow-ups over the next couple of months. I had some gigs out of town that I had to go and do, and they honored that. And, I think it was June they called me and had me come and do like a refresher of the information, like a general dance call of information that I had already learned, sing through the material one more time that I had already sung and learned. And I started May 9th, 2017.
And here we
Was that
are. There you go.
around? Yeah.
So can you tell those listening what a universal standby is as opposed to just a regular standby? I mean, I know what it is, but some people might not know.
Um, the difference is that, um, well, prior to this specific position, I gotta pat myself on the back here, is that was not an actual contract in existence with Equity. So with my accepting this position, it actually created a brand new contract under Equity.
Okay.
And it's basically someone who I was stationed on Broadway. That was my home base. But whenever there was a need, it was just like a universal swing in another company in the US specifically. So I never went to London. I would be shipped out to cover the Three Sisters in any of the US companies for whatever a lot of time that they requested.
Mhm.
Um, the difference between the swing and the standby is that the standbys exclusively cover principal tracks, and the swings cover ensemble and or principal tracks. So I would just cover the Three Sisters. I didn't do any ensemble work, and that I did until 2019. I want to say maybe February 2019. So I did it for 2 years.
Yeah. And so now you're starring as Angelica. So how did that come? Yes, nobody can see what we're doing, but we're like, yeah, we're great. So how did the role of Angelica full time come about?
When I think in one of the years of negotiations, I think I just made it known to
Mhm.
the creative team that whenever, if ever, Mandy chose to leave, that I would like to be considered to take over. So I think half of the battle is letting them know specifically what you want.
Yeah.
Um, and and I think Mandy, she had been here as longer than I had been with the company. I think she joined 2016.
Mhm.
And so when it came back after the pandemic, Mandy was pretty open about her bout with cancer.
Mhm.
I think after she went through that, and then she went through the pandemic, I think something in her said, you know what, there are other things, there are other paths
Yeah.
that I want to continue to invest in. And so she lovingly passed the torch on to me. I mean, I was just sitting here waiting, what I'm saying? I mean, not waiting for her in particular,
Yeah.
but just waiting for whatever the next opportunity was. And because for myself, after the pandemic, I had two kids.
Yeah.
So the options drastically change in
Mhm.
terms of what I would think to do, what I would prioritize, my trajectory, um, when it comes down to, you know, what I really be looking to do career wise.
Yeah.
Angling.
Yeah, so let's talk about you do have young kids. I don't know their ages. But pandemic did you have the kids during the pandemic? Or was it
Uh-huh.
Oh wow. Yeah. So is it like two under two or something?
Yes, at one time it was two under two. Now one is 2.5 and the other is one.
Okay.
Um, like 13 months.
Yeah.
But it's crazy.
Yeah.
It's nuts.
So
This is why people don't have children in the industry.
yeah, I don't have any kids and I work in the medical field and like two of my coworkers do. And I'm like, I don't have kids, but I get what they're saying. Yeah, so you say it's crazy, but it's the holiday season, you have your holiday schedule, you're in a role that won a Tony, you're in like the biggest musical known to man. How is that balance for you?
It's really day by day,
Mhm,
honestly. It's been a real learning curve to go from, singing occasionally, being off stage and getting a certain amount of rest and singing occasionally, and then singing every single day. Excuse me, that's my phone. And that 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 is a learning curve within itself,
mhm,
um, and a bit of a struggle sometimes, because everything in your life has a very specifically allotted time frame,
mhm.
even down to when I eat at night. I have to eat during the show to be able to get home and go to bed so that I can be up in the morning with my kids. I can't go home and then eat and then wait for my food to digest before I go to bed. So it's like everything feels so very regimented. You have to have a great deal of discipline. And even when you have the discipline, even still, it's not enough,
Mhm.
because kids are wild cards. Sometimes they sleep through the night. I mean, my daughter just started sleeping through the night.
Perfect
Just
timing too. Holiday season, sleeping through the night, perfect.
okay, just started, and I mean, it's hard. It's hard because they are up there, and because you want to be your full self with them.
Mhm.
You know what I mean? I don't want to be a zombie. I don't want to be a slug. I don't want to be on my phone. I don't want to be, watching television or trying to get me time in, because my time with them is so short
Yeah.
during the day. You know what I mean?
Mhm,
Um, that mom guilt is very real in that it is ever present.
mhm,
Huh. But you just try each day to let go of the day before
mhm.
and promise yourself that you're going to check in with yourself at some point throughout the day so that you're not jumping through hoops on on empty. You know what I mean? That's just very easy to do when you start the day with your alarm clock as a child screaming, and you get up, you're like, I gotta do the dog's gotta go for a walk, you gotta feed this one, you gotta do that, you gotta call this one back, you gotta, you know what I mean? The marathon is very, very real.
Yeah.
It's very, very real. But the key for me is stopping to be able to count the blessings in them all, because I have so many friends who can't have kids, who want kids. You know what I mean? Who, are still looking for their partner. Like I can't complain about it.
Yeah.
I really can't, because I have a very full life.
Mhm.
And it's hard, but it's full.
Yeah. I mentioned before we started that I am going to ask about dream roles, which I'm going to do now, but that also kind of plays into like work as a working mom. Where do you kind of see your career going after Hamilton? And do you have
Sure.
any dream roles that kind of play into that?
I mean, it's hard because, especially with this round of negotiations happening over at Equity, where we are trying to fight for our lifestyles. We're
Mhm,
trying to fight for being able to maintain, our personal life, that
mhm,
balance out our lives. So we're not just, driving ourselves into the ground. And because 8 show a week is so hard on the body, um, it's hard to really confidently uh, have a trajectory. I think one of the main lessons that having children teaches you, um, is flexibility,
mhm.
going flow, whatever it's gonna do what it's gonna do.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I mean, I'm not alone and I think that's the biggest thing is that there is a community of mothers out here. There's Raina White over at Some Like It Hot, who's got 3 little boys. I don't know how she's doing that with
Yeah.
3. I said, oh, I know for sure. Once I have 3, that's it.
Yeah.
But she's doing it, and it's inspiring to be able to look to my left and my right, sees Shelley Williams out here directing, and Audra's going back into uh, um, the Ohio State murders, and you've just got women to your left and your right who are powering through. So I know it can be done.
Yeah.
But it just affirms in me that there is no pathway right now. There's no singular trajectory. Like, you just kind of got to throw it all out there and see what sticks.
Yeah.
I mean, there's, I want to do film and TV. Of course, everybody wants to do film and TV, but there's 3 roles on film and TV.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? It's going to somebody who already does film and TV. You know what I'm saying? Like, it's just, I want to do voiceover. Yeah, it's great, but the voiceover is also very close field, and it's also something that requires a whole nother type of discipline and availability and responsiveness. And though I have gotten some voiceover things, being able to maintain that while maintaining, it's a lot. So the bottom line is, girl, I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know.
You'll figure it out once it happens. But with that being said, like, do you have any dream roles that you would like to tackle?
Dream roles, I mean,
when you get them, you figure it out situation, I guess.
Honestly, Some Like It Hot has a role that I think I would love to sing the music in, but all that dancing, I don't know. That might have been.
I have not seen it yet, but it is on like the top of my list.
It's good. Adriana. Adriana is killing them out there. Okay. She is playing.
I saw her in 6 and I'm like, she is incredible. She's amazing.
So is Jay Harrison G. He's over there. He's killing it. Yeah, I mean, the song she sings, I would love to sing at some point in my life. I don't know if I'm, that role will necessarily happen, but for me, honestly, I think for a dream role, it's one that I originate.
Yeah.
I want to originate a role. I think that would be the dream, more so than replaying something that's already exists.
Yeah. Do you have any top going theater experiences that have really stuck with you, other than like your first top going theater experiences, other than like your first show being Les Mis, as we discussed?
I remember seeing Audra in this theater playing Bess opposite North Lewis. And when I say I had chills all night after the performance was over, anything Audra does, honestly, seeing her in Lady Day was incredible.
I saw that show and I called my mom after, and I was like, it was literally watching a masterclass in acting. She's like, she's Audra. That's all you can say.
I mean, point blank and period. But I think that probably what left the most indelible mark on me is watching her in Porgy and Bess and her commitment to it. I can still feel the chills that she left me with. Yeah. For the rest of
yeah. So we've come towards the end. Now I do like to ask the Inside the Actor Studio questions. So there's just 10 really quick questions. What is your favorite word?
Favorite word? Probably poop sticks.
That's fantastic. And I would like to steal that and use that in my everyday life now.
Please do. Please.
I poop sticks. Great. It's going to happen. And my friends are going to be like, yeah, absolutely. My friends are going to be like, what is that? I go, just enjoy the word. What is your least favorite word?
Moist. Yeah, I don't like it.
It's a common one. What turns you on?
What turns me on? It's gonna have to be watching my husband tap dance on stage. That's the biggest turn on.
We can leave it there. What turns you off?
Turns me off. What turns me off? Not being genuine.
Yeah.
Disingenuousness, I guess, if that's a word.
Yeah. What's your favorite curse word?
Ooh, shit.
What sound or noise do you love?
I love the sound of my children's laughter.
What sound or noise do you hate?
Probably construction.
Yeah. What sound? Oh, no, that's a repeated word. That repeated question. What
Mhm.
profession other than yours would you like to attempt?
Hmm. Other than mine, would I like to attempt? Hmm. Maybe like fashion design. I don't know. That's a lie. I have no idea.
Okay. Whatever you want.
Yes, I want to cook. I want to bake.
Do it.
Yeah.
What profession would you not like to do?
Garbage truck. I know they make a lot of money.
Well, it'd be quite smelly too.
Mhm.
And finally, if heaven exists, what would you like to hear God say when you arrive at the pearly gates?
That I did a good job.
And then as James Lipton would say, here are your students.
Dun, 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 dun.
So we are at the end, but I always, when I remember to, I always like to end the podcast recording with this question. Why do you think theater is important?
Theater is important because it connects us all with the human experience. It forces us to have to put aside our judgments and our preconceived notions about people. And as actors, we have to commit to characters that we may not necessarily agree with 100% and find the humanity in them. As audience members, our eyes are opened and we are experiencing a common human experience, whether it be love or shame or grief or, disappointment, and feel what it is to go through that thing. And I think it just keeps us connected. It keeps us human, keeps us feeling, keeps us pondering, wondering, wandering, um, it keeps us going in a different way. And I think it's so important to touch base in that way.
Well, Jennie, thank you so much for coming on to the podcast. It was really wonderful talking to you and getting to know you and hearing all of the wonderful insight you have about being a working actor and a working mother. And if you haven't already seen her in Hamilton as Angelica, please go and see Hamilton. I'm going to stop the recording, but you can still hang on. Thank you so
Yeah.
much. Is there anything else you wanted to add before we end?
Yeah, just one thing I always say whenever I get the opportunity is that comparison is the thief of joy.
Mm.
So if don't let yourself get stuck in the rut of comparing yourself, comparing your gifts or the things that are innately within you or the things that are given to other people or whatever. Just don't get stuck in comparison and just count your blessings.
Yeah, well, I think that's a great way to end the podcast. Well, thank you so much for being on, and thanks for those listening. And